mercilessly tantalizing. Its course had at last led it to a clump of grass into which it disappeared. The man was completely captivated by the beetle with the yellowish front legs. When he had observed the sandy soil, it seemed to him that his guess was correct. Actually, the beetle family is representative of desert insects. According to one theory, their strange pattern of flight is a snare for the purpose of enticing small animals away from their nests. Prey such as mice and lizards are lured out in spite of themselves, wander into the desert, and collapse from hunger and fatigue. Their bodies then become the beetles' food. These beetles have the elegant Japanese name of letter bearer and present graceful features, but actually they have sharp jaws and are ferocious and cannibalistic by nature. But whether or not his theory was correct, the man was unquestionably beguiled by the mysterious pattern of the beetles' flight, and his interest in sand, which was the condition for the beetles' existence, could not help but grow. He began to read everything he could about it, and as his research progressed, he realized that sand was a very interesting substance. For example, opening to the article on sand in the encyclopedia, he found the following: sand, an aggregate of rock fragments, sometimes including lodestone, tinstone, and more rarely gold dust, diameter 2 to 1/16 millimeter. A very clear definition indeed. In short, then, sand came from fragmented rock and was intermediate between clay and pebbles, but simply calling it an intermediate substance did not provide a really satisfactory explanation. Why was it that isolated deserts and sandy terrain came into existence through the sifting out of only the sand from soil in which clay, sand, and stones were thoroughly mixed together? If a true intermediate substance were involved, the erosive action of wind and water would necessarily produce any number of intermingling, intermediate forms in the range between rock and clay. However, there are in fact only three forms that can be clearly distinguished from one another: stones, sand, and clay. Furthermore, sand is sand, wherever it is. Strangely enough, there is already almost no difference in the size of the grains whether they come from the Gobi Desert or from the beach at Enoshima. The size of the grains show very little variation and follows a Gaussian distribution curve with the true mean of 1/8 millimeter. One commentary gave a very simple explanation of the decompensation of land through the erosive action of wind and water. The lighter particles were progressively blown away over great distances, but the particular significance of the 1/8 millimeter diameter of the grains was left unexplained. In opposition to this, another book on geology added an explanation along these lines: air or water currents set up a turbulence. The smallest wavelength of this turbulent flow is about equal to the diameter of the desert sand. Owing to this peculiarity, only the sand is extracted from the soil, being drawn out at right angles to the flow. If the cohesion of the soil is weak, the sand is sucked up into the air by light winds, which, of course, do not disturb stones or clay, and falls to the ground again, being deposited to the leeward. The peculiarities of sand would seem to be a matter of aerodynamics. Hence, we can add this to the first definition as B, a particle of crushed rock of such dimension as to be easily moved by a fluid. Because winds and water currents flow over the land, the formation of sand is unavoidable. As long as the winds blew, the rivers flowed, and the sea stirred, sand would be born grain by grain from the earth, and like a living being it would creep everywhere. The sands never rested. Gently but surely they invaded and destroyed the surface of the earth. This image of the flowing sand made an indescribably exciting impact on the man. The barrenness of sand, as it is usually pictured, was not caused by simple dryness, but apparently was due to the ceaseless movement that made it inhospitable to all living things. What a difference compared with the dreary way human beings clung together year in and year out. Certainly, sand was not suitable for life, yet is a stationary condition absolutely indispensable for existence? Didn't unpleasant competition arise precisely because one tried to cling to a fixed position? If one were to give up a fixed position and abandon oneself to the movement of the sands, competition would soon stop. Actually, in the desert flowers bloomed, and insects and other animals lived their lives. These creatures were able to escape competition through their great ability to adjust. For example, the man's beetle family. While he mused on the effect of the flowing sands, he was seized from time to time by hallucinations in which he himself began to move with the flow. His head bent down. He began to walk, following the crescent-shaped line of dunes that surrounded the village like a rampart and towered above it. He paid almost no attention to the distant landscape. An entomologist must concentrate his whole attention within a radius of about 3 yards around his feet, and it is one of the fundamental rules that he should not have the sun at his back. If the sun should get behind him, he would frighten the insects with his own shadow. As a result, a collector's forehead and nose are always sunburned. The man advanced slowly at a steady pace. With every step the sand splashed up over his shoes, except for shallow rooted weeds that looked as though they would shoot up in a day if there were any moisture. There appeared to be no living thing. Once in a while, tortoise shell colored flies would flit around, drawn by the odor of human perspiration. However, precisely because it was such a place, he could expect to find something. Beetles are not especially gregarious, and they say that, in extreme cases, a single beetle will cordon off an area of as much as 1 square mile. Patiently, he kept walking round and round. Suddenly, he paused in his tracks. Something had stirred near the roots of the clump of grass. It was a spider. Spiders were of no use to him. He sat down to smoke a cigarette. The wind blew ceaselessly from the sea, and, far below, turbulent white waves beat against the base of the sand dunes. Where the dunes fell away to the west, a slight hill crowned with bare rock jutted out into the sea. On it the sunshine lay scattered in the needle points of light. He had difficulty getting his matches to light. Out of 10 tries, not one had caught. Along the length of the matchsticks he had thrown away, ripples of sand were moving at about the speed of the second hand of his watch. He focused his attention on one wavelet, and when it arrived at the tip of his heel, he arose. The sand spilled from the gathers in his trousers. He spat, and the inside of his mouth felt rough. So probably there weren't too many insects. Perhaps the movement of the sand was too violent. No, he shouldn't be so quickly discouraged. His theory guaranteed that there would be some. The lines of dunes leveled off. and a section jutted out on the side away from the sea. He was lured on by the feeling that in all probability his prey was there, and he made his way down the gentle slope. Here and there, the remains of what seemed like a wind fence made of waddling marked off the point of the promontory, beyond which, on a still lower level, lay a plateau. He went on, crossing across the ripples of sand, which were hewn with machine-like regularity. Suddenly his line of vision was cut off, and he stood on the verge of a cliff, looking down into a deep cavity. The cavity, over 60 feet wide, formed an irregular oval. The far slope seemed relatively gentle, while in contrast, the near side gave the feeling of being almost perpendicular. It rolled up to his feet in a smooth curve, like a lip of heavy porcelain. Placing one foot gingerly on the edge, he peered in. The shadowy interior of the hole set again the luminous edge already announced the approach of evening. In the gloom at the bottom a small house lay submerged in silence. One end of its ridgepole was sunk diagonally into the sand wall, quite like an oyster, he thought. No matter what they did, he mused, there was no escaping the law of the sand. Just as he was placing his camera in position, the sand at his feet began to move with the rustle. He drew his foot back, shuddering, but the flow of the sand did not stop for some time. What a delicate, dangerous balance! Breathing deeply, he wiped his sweaty palms several times on the side of his trousers. A coughing broke out next to him. Unnoticed, an old man, apparently one of the village fishermen, was standing there almost touching his shoulder. As he looked at the camera, and then at the bottom of the hole, the old fellow grinned, screwing up his face, which was wrinkled like a half-tanned rabbit skin. A sticky secretion encrusted the corners of his reddened eyes. "Are you inspecting?" It was a thin voice, blown by the wind, rather as if it came from a portable radio, but the accent was clear and not particularly difficult to catch. "Inspecting?" Flustered, he concealed the lens with his palm. He shifted his insect net into full view. "What do you mean? I don't understand. I'm collecting insects. My specialty is sand insects." "What?" The old man did not seem to have understood. "Collecting insects," he repeated again in a loud voice. "Insects. Insects. I catch them like this." "Insects?" The old man appeared dubious. Looking down, he spat. Or perhaps it would be more exact to say, he let the spittle ooze from his mouth. Snatched from his lips by the wind, it sailed out in a long thread. Good heavens, what was he so nervous about? "Is there some inspecting going on in this vicinity?" "No, no. As long as you're not inspecting, I really don't mind what you do." "No, I'm not inspecting." The old man, without even nodding, turned his back and, scuffing the tips of his straw sandals, went slowly away along the ridge. Some 50 yards further on, when had they come? 3 men, dressed alike, apparently waiting for the old man, squatted silently on the sand. The one in the middle had a pair of binoculars, which he was turning around and around on his knee. Soon the three, joined by the old man, began to discuss something among themselves. They kicked the sand at their feet. It looked as if they were having a violent argument. Just as he was trying to unconcernedly to go with his search for the beetle, the old man came hurrying back again. "Then you're really not someone from the government office?" The government office? You're quite wrong. Abruptly, he took out his business card as if to indicate that he had had enough. The old man's lips moved laboriously. Ah, you're a school teacher. I have absolutely no connection with the government office. Hmm, so you're a teacher. At last he appeared to understand, and the corners of his eyes wrinkled up. Carrying the card respectfully, he went back again. The three others, apparently satisfied, stood up and withdrew. But the old man returned once again